Coming up on Plane Crazy Down Under. It's been many years in the planning and now it's a reality. The Pacific Airshow is about to take flight above Queensland's magnificent Gold Coast. We catch up with the show's CEO and director, Kevin Elliott.
It's going to be an amazing air show, both in the air and on the ground, but we have a vision to expand this to become really a family-friendly outdoor lifestyle festival.
And we have a yak with Jeff Boerboon as he prepares to showcase his amazing, unique Yak 110. Hey, see what I did there?
It's actually the first time in the history of aviation that two airplanes have been brought together and then added a jet engine.
It's looking like a great weekend of aviation action ahead as we get plane crazy.
Well, hi everyone and welcome back to the show. This is, of course, the program where we like to look at Australia's aviation scene. I'm Steve Vischer. Joining me as always is my good friend Grant McHerron. And mate, as we record this, talking about the Australian aviation scene, there's a huge event coming up.
That's right, mate. The Pacific Airshow's Gold Coast event is coming up, as we record this, in a week. It will be underway.
Yes, and it's fantastic. And what's even more cool, Grant, is that you and I will be there. So I'm glad I got the time off to get up there. It's going to be fantastic. I'm really looking forward to this. It's been something that's been in the wings for quite some time. And obviously COVID, the lockdowns and all that sort of stuff did put that back for a year. But on the bright side, I guess, that's given them an additional year to plan for it. And it's really shaping up to be a great event at a let's face it, a fantastic location too.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's get north to the Gold Coast where in winter, it's only going to be 23 to 27 degrees centigrade, dropping down to a chilly 13 overnight, which happens to be pretty close to the daily max down here in Melbourne.
Well, of course, if you're a regular listener to the show, you may remember that I did mention that at the end of the last episode, I was heading off to Thailand. And so we did spend 2 weeks over there between that episode and this one. And it was beautiful weather over there, I must say. But coming back to Melbourne, the day we came back, the sun was out, but the wind was out too. And it was noticeably chilly. So I'll be looking forward to getting up to the Gold Coast for the weather alone.
Thaw me out, baby. Thaw me out.
Yes. Well, of course, the Pacific Airshow has been running for many, many years and over at Huntington Beach in California, another wonderful location for those who've ever been there. And this is a real experiment for them, I think, bringing it not only overseas, but, of course, right across to the other side of the Pacific to host it here in Australia. We're really looking forward to that. The CEO and the director of Pacific Airshow is Kevin Elliott, and he's been good enough to give us some time. He's on the line now. G'day, Kevin.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming and thanks for bringing the Pacific Airshow down to Australia and to the Gold Coast. What a wonderful thing.
It's been a true labor of love for the team, myself. It's been unlike anything we've ever done before, professionally and personally. It's been great. Feel like Australia's become my second home now.
Well, you'll be welcome here as long as you keep bringing us fantastic air shows like this. I can tell you, the Pacific Airshow has obviously been going for many years in the United States at beautiful Huntington Beach there in California. What was the inspiration to bring it across to another country and specifically to the Gold Coast?
Well, it's an interesting story, actually. It almost by accident, and ultimately not by accident at the same time. Ken and I, our air operations director, were kind of thinking about Huntington Beach, and we would have these late night conversations where we would talk about, all these great places where air shows could potentially be put on, and we'd get online and we'd go through Google Earth and we'd spend hours just going down the rabbit hole of what if. And we actually got a call to go out to Daytona Beach and to potentially look in Florida at doing a show. We flew to Daytona Beach to meet with them, and it's the home of Embry-Riddle, a really, obviously great town, racing town, great events, history. And, we saw the beach and we thought, this could work. We had a few meetings, and then the next morning when we were set to leave, we were having breakfast at our hotel, which is right on the water, as most of them are in Daytona. And the waves were crashing over the patio and into the window of the restaurant, and all of the was being washed out to Cuba. And as we sat there, I told Ken, I said, Ken, I think if we had built the event set up on the beach, it'd be halfway to Cuba by now. And so we were headed to the airport, flying home, sort of feeling a little bit discouraged by, all of this energy that we had spent forth and, ultimately sort of led us to the conclusion that it wasn't going to really work for us. And we said, there's got to be another place around the world. And I think at that point I shouted out on the airplane at 30,000 feet, which is totally irony, what about Gold Coast? And so, of course, we went down the rabbit hole of Gold Coast, and here we are 3.5 years later.
Wow, 3.5 years. That's a heck of a lot of planning. And I mean, got to ask, how's it been working with both local council, federal, and also CASA Air Services? You're close to Gold Coast International. That would have raised a lot of eyebrows at our conservative friends at CASA. So how's it all been putting it all together?
Well, I think, I'd like to think anyway, and I do believe that, Pacific Airshow, we're not some fly-by-night organization that's just coming in here deciding we want to throw our first air show, right? We operate the largest air show in the United States by attendance in some of the most complicated airspace in the world, being there between Orange County Airport, Los Angeles International Airport, Long Beach Airport, lots of municipal airports, and there's a lot going on in that space. To work with the FAA and, our respective agencies to bring them along on the journey that this can be done, right? It can be done in a way where it's not disruptive, and it really does elevate the game of all of the agencies and all of the airports and all of the participants, right? Because airports love airplanes, pilots love airplanes. And generally speaking, where there's a will, there's a way. And that's what we found. And I have to tell you that the spirit of CASA and Air Services have really reflected that experience in the United States. And it's been something that we've been really, really pleased to be a part of here. And obviously things are slightly different. We understand that there's it's an intense regulatory environment, but everybody we've encountered has said, yeah, we're going to make this work. We're going to work with you to make it happen, including the Gold Coast Airport, who has been a tremendous player since the very beginning. A little anecdote: one of our very first calls 3.5 years ago was to the cab manager, Scott Stevens, at Gold Coast Airport. And Ken had actually called him and said, yeah, I'm Ken Ashmore. I'm with the Pacific Airshow over in Huntington Beach, California. Maybe you've heard of it. And he says, I've heard of it. I was there last year. It's awesome.
Oh.
And so it was right then and there that Scott Stevens became a big supporter and, ultimately a friend and advisor in the process. So literally has not been one person that we have come across encouraging and supportive.
Because one of the really unique aspects of this display, of course, is that it's not being held at an airport, which is traditionally, of course, air shows would be held at airports, which is great for pilots and people who are already converted. But one of the things we want to do, of course, is showcase aviation to a more wider audience. And I really think that having it in a location like this or at Huntington Beach, that's a great opportunity to do exactly that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You just hit the nail on the head, Steve. The whole premise behind Pacific Airshow, right? Our tagline is redefining the airshow experience. And people say, what does that mean? And for me, it means we're bringing the airshow to the people rather than asking the people to go to the airshow. And that is the genius of what we're doing. And frankly, this airshow is going to appeal to a very, very broad non-endemic audience to aviation. These will be people that don't know the difference between one aircraft type or another aircraft type. They're just there to hang out with their friends, their family, be on the beach, enjoy the hospitality, enjoy the great sun, and I guess this time of year on the Gold Coast, and really, they'll learn over the course of many years, right? You'll have people who come back and say, "Oh, this jet's my favorite," or "That performer is my favorite," or "Gosh, we want to go back and see that Yak 110 thing. I can't believe they glued two airplanes together." And that's what's cool about it, right? It's like my mom is as into Pacific Airshow as I am, and I'm an airplane nut. And so that tells you all you need to know.
So, as you said, it's reaching out to people in a location where they already are, or it's easy to get to. And heck, for those of us down south here in Melbourne, it's going to be great to get to somewhere where it's above 15 degrees Celsius every day, and you can actually see the sun. But some questions for you, though. You mentioned that we've got all these aircraft. We're going to have Super Hornets. We're going to have all sorts of aircraft from the US, Australia, etc. But what's happening on the ground beyond watching the aircraft doing their flights and so on?
Yeah, so I mean, we're I want to sort of like preface by saying I think we're in the first iteration of what this event will be, right? Obviously, we've had several years to develop it and expand it, but in this first year, we're going to achieve the 20% solution. It's going to be an amazing air show. Both in the air and on the ground. But we have a vision to expand this to become really a family-friendly outdoor lifestyle festival, right? Where there's pop culture and all kinds of different hospitality and great food and all of those things along the Esplanade, which we will have all of that this year, including, DJs and all kinds of different stuff going on down there. But, in the future, we intend to continue to add those elements. So, when you purchase a ticket, because people will say, well, why purchase a ticket to an air show when I can just, look from my balcony and watch for free? And the answer is that number one, being at Show Center on the beach, as close as you can possibly be, is the best seat in the house. You may have a nice apartment, but it's not the same as being right there on the ground. The second thing is that we've got this unbelievable massive sound system, not just your typical air show sound system where you have a speaker on a pole. We're talking concert grade sound system and an unbelievable lineup of music and announcements and things that are going on to tell you what the heck is going on in front of you. And that is a huge component of it. And then you add to that all the hospitality, the food, the drinks, all of that on top of it. It just becomes basically a party-like atmosphere. It's unlike anything you've ever been to. And for your listeners that have been to 100 air shows and go, oh, yeah, we've done that. We've been there. We've done that. I can tell you, I was one of those people that went to the Pacific Airshow in Huntington Beach the first year. And I went, this is absolutely incredible. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. And I think a lot of the visitors will have that experience and hopefully leave and be our brand ambassadors out there to the general public to say, this is something you don't want to miss.
Kevin, you mentioned, of course, that you're an aviation fan like we all are here at Plane Crazy Down Under. Can you tell us a bit about your aviation background and where that all began? Yeah,
absolutely. So interestingly, grew up flying remote control airplanes with my father. Of course, where all good aviation fanatics start, in the garage. As my mom said, all my friends were playing G.I. Joe, and I was in the garage gluing my fingers together. But that was what I love to do. And so my love for aviation really grew out of my love for remote control airplanes, actually flying competitively for Team USA. And my mom called me Plane Brain my entire childhood. So, really, really growing up in that environment, I think solidified it for me. And then, of course, getting a little older, going to high school, going to college, getting a job, that really interferes with your remote control airplane habit. Finally finding my way to founding my company in 2006, which is an event production company called Code 4 based in Huntington Beach, and producing big events, right? Growing my company over the last 16, 17 years to being one of the most respected event production companies in the United States, working on massive projects, and then just happening to have Ken Ashmore decide, hey, let's throw an air show in Huntington Beach. I go down to the air show with my wife, and I watch this air show from the beach, and I think, this is truly spectacular. I have never seen this many people in one place before in my life. I should reach out and see if they need some help. And it was at that moment my wife reminded me, or rather asked me, why I have to ruin everything, why I can't just take a day off and enjoy something without having to turn it into a business opportunity. And so I just want to say, sorry, honey, but she's enjoying Australia at this point. So there we are. I got involved with the air show and became an investor, and ultimately acquired the show in 2018 and have grown it ever since. So it was a interesting opportunity to basically marry my passion with my profession all these years later.
During your visits to Australia here, have you had opportunities to, really get yourself well known amongst the airshow community here? I mean, obviously it's a much smaller community here, but also it doesn't lack any enthusiasm, that's for sure.
Yeah, I would like to think so. I mean, we've certainly done our best. I mean, we've gone to Avalon and Wings Over Illawarra and tried to meet. And over that time, I think one of the first letters of support that we received was from, Mark Awad, who at the time was the president of the Australian Warbirds Association, who by coincidence was high school friends with a friend of mine from Huntington Beach, because that's where Mark's from. So it's really a small world, right? I mean, aviation, it's a big planet, but ultimately the aviation community is a small world. As Grant was saying, he's done work with our announcer, Matt Jolly, who lives a world away. But, you guys with the, age of the internet are just, a click away, really. And so we're hoping that a rising tide lifts all boats. This is not designed to in any way take anything away and run back to America with it or anything like that. This is an opportunity for us to add to the aviation community and the rich heritage that's here in Australia, and try to level up the airshow game, add where we can, be a good contributor. Those are our goals, right? I mean, money in the aviation business is, if that's your primary goal, you probably should find a different business, right? And so
Yeah,
To be
very
honest
true.
with you, this is partially fun for us. As sick as that sounds, our objective is not, to come in and make a bunch of money. We want to elevate the game, and ultimately, hopefully, we can build something that's commercially viable, and that's the hope.
So you've done Huntington Beach, of course. You've got Gold Coast. Are there any other international cities that you're talking to or that have approached you and potential for expanding this to other parts of the world that you're allowed to tell us about?
Yeah, definitely. I won't reference anybody in specific, but I will say that there's been many countries that have reached out to us, either people that are specifically with the government, or potentially folks that are, represent major events, elements of those groups, to discuss the possibility of attracting an event like Pacific Airshow. And our vision now is to really expand this event to several key destinations around the world, right, that can support it. It's not every city that can support an event like this. As Ken and I will attest on our late nights on Google Earth, you need major events infrastructure, you need airports, you need airplanes, you need a rich aviation heritage, a great community that can rally behind something like this. Because as neat as we are, it takes hundreds of people all contributing to be able to make this happen. And it's all about, as you mentioned, going around, building those relationships, rallying that support, and having people in the aviation community support the vision. And that's what we've done here in Australia. And I think after this first event, I think people will begin to take even more notice. I think what we saw in Huntington Beach was 500,000 people come to the beach over 3 days and have a great time, right? And they left and they all told their friends. And the next year they had 1 million people show up to the beach.
Wow.
And so, if we get 150,000 people to come to the Gold Coast that have never experienced this type of event before, and they have a good time, and they go back and tell their friends, hey, this is awesome. It's a great time of year to go to the Gold Coast. You should definitely come. Don't miss it. I think we could see a big influx of visitors this time. And I will add, I know I'm talking a lot, but I will add one more bit here, which is that, there tends to be a lot of events, I think, that overhype themselves. And we were really cautious to try to not do that, right? People will say, well, we haven't heard much about it. Where's your marketing, this and that? And the marketing, we've spent, well over $1 million on marketing, right? So people know about the event, but we didn't want to overhype it to the point where, Gold Coast residents and the members of Southeast Queensland freak out and take off and don't come to the event. That's not the objective, right? We want the local community to love this as much as we want interstate and out of region visitation.
Well, what are you most excited about bringing to the audience with this event? What do you think is going to be the most pop the rocks, get them really excited kind of thing?
Well, I think honestly, the biggest change that we're going to be bringing in, the most exciting part, is the tempo, right? Because it's just one thing after the next. I mean, as an example, we have 48 aircraft in our air show this year, right? That's not a insignificant amount of aircraft to be launching from remote airports and having hit an exact time in a TRA. So it's a really well orchestrated thing. We've got 3 air bosses, or as you guys call them, ring masters, that are coordinating all of that as an example. It's quite a feat, but I think the tempo is going to be something that hasn't been seen before. The overall experience at the beach. Obviously, the sort of elephant in the room is we are on an island, right? And we have tried to bring as much as we can to this initial edition of the air show. Our team is probably the best in the business when it comes to, wrangling support. We are a U.S. company. We run the largest air show in the United States. So we've worked hard to try to build those commitments. And I think that over the years, you'll see more and more fast jets and more and more military assets realizing, hey, this is something we want to go to year in and year out. But then, to put a simple answer to it, it's clearly the Yak 110, right? I mean, let's face it. That is that's the one-word answer to your question.
It's certainly not an aircraft that you would normally see in skies in this part of the world, Kevin, I can tell you. We spoke a lot about, obviously, the upcoming Gold Coast event, but we should mention here too that the US event at Huntington Beach it's really not that far away either.
Yeah, we've made an agreement with our team that we wouldn't talk about it, just at least until Gold Coast was over, so we don't psych ourselves out. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's coming up here at the end of September, and we're really excited about that. I can tell you, if you're going to deciding you want to do the Pacific Airshow circuit in 2023, Pacific Airshow Huntington Beach is going to be one not to miss. It is an absolute banger in terms of the lineup. It's just incredible. So, we are really excited about Huntington Beach. We're obviously really excited about finally launching Gold Coast. This entire event was originally supposed to launch in 2022, but unfortunately due to COVID, we ended up pushing it back a year, and that ultimately was the right decision, given access to the country and recovery and all that stuff. So, it's finally our first year where we're going to be able to say we got 2 on the board, and sky's the limit from there.
Well, Kevin, we want to thank you so much for spending some time with us and having this chat with our audience. And we want to thank you also for bringing this wonderful event to the Gold Coast. We're really looking forward to getting up there. And we certainly hope that we can have a chat with you again once it's all said and done.
Yeah, let's do that. And I appreciate the support. We appreciate everybody coming out to check it out. And like I said, we're here for the long haul. Our team is, sort of a what you see is what you get kind of people. And, we're in it for all the right reasons, and appreciate the community supporting us. And anything we can do, we're here. Thank you guys very much for getting the word out.
It's a pleasure. And folks, be sure to check out the Pacific Airshow's social media feeds for all the details on what's going on and when, and of course for ticketing information. Now, we heard Kevin there talking a lot about the Yak 110, which will be performing at this year's show on the Gold Coast. But, what exactly is a Yak 110? Well, we'll have all the answers to that on the other side of the break, so stick with us as Plane Crazy Down Under continues.
I'm Matt Hall.
Hi, I'm Matt Hall.
I'm Matt Hall.
No, I'm Matt Hall.
No, I'm Matt Hall.
Everyone wants to be Australia's champion Red Bull air race pilot, and now you can own a piece of Matt Hall memorabilia. Polos, t-shirts and caps for all shapes and sizes can be found at matthallracing.com. Just go to the online store and you too can be in the loop.
Hello, I'm Matt Hall.
Keeping up to date with the latest news is a huge part of our daily lives. Now you can have news on demand with the Australian Independent Radio News app. News and sport in your pocket whenever you want it. Wherever you are in the world, if you call Australia home, you can stay in touch with the Air News app. Download it now for news on the go.
This is Air News.
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 Australian Independent Radio News.
So the new GE Aviation GE9X engines they're building for the new 777X have a 10%...
Carl, what on earth are you on about? It's like a different language.
Here at the Plane Talking UK studios, we like to do things a little differently. If you've got a keen interest in aviation, join us each week where we'll give you an in-depth rundown of all the weekly news from around the world with a focus on what matters to us here in the UK.
With regular interviews from people living and working in the industry, we'll take you behind the scenes of some of the biggest air shows, airports and airlines from across the globe. To find our podcast, take yourself to www.planetalkinguk.com. Look for us on iTunes, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
The Plane Talking UK podcast, the show where we talk plain English made by a passenger for anyone.
What a magnificent sound. You're listening to Plane Crazy Down Under, the show where we talk aviation, and if you're a bit of an aircraft enthusiast, you might be listening to that wonderful sound and thinking, you know what, that sounds a bit like a yak engine. But hang on, is that 2 yak engines? Hang on again, perhaps, is that a turbine engine I can hear in the middle of all that? Well, you'd be right on all counts, and it is in fact the wonderful sound made by the very unique Yak 110 aircraft. That aircraft will be on display at the Pacific Airshow on the Gold Coast. We're really looking forward to seeing it. The pilot and owner of the Yak 110 is Jeff Boerboon. He joins us on the line now. G'day, Jeff.
Hey, good day. How's it going?
Oh, very well. Welcome to Australia.
Thank you. I'm super happy to be here at the Gold Coast Surfers Paradise here. It's just an amazing feeling. Everyone here has been so helpful in getting the airplane ready. We had it come into Archer Field where Ben Anderson, my mechanic, put the airplane together, and then we moved it down here to Southport, and we're rocking now.
That sounds awesome. Now, let's step back just a tad. You've got the most amazing aircraft I've ever seen back at Oshkosh 2019 and heard. And you've also, like, doing a lot of aerobatics, but your day job is like flying airliners, quite different across there. How did you get into flying? How long have you been flying? And what got you into doing aerobatics and air shows?
Well, the aviation goes pretty deep for me. My dad was a pilot, commercial pilot, not for a living, but had the license, and he got me started with building and flying model airplanes from a very young age. And we went to, I grew up in Minnesota, so Oshkosh was just next door. So when I was 7 years old was my first experience into Oshkosh. And when I saw the likes of Leo Laudenslager and Charlie Hilliard and Art Scholl especially, I mean, it's like, wait a minute, I've been flying these model airplanes and I can see that happening, but now there's somebody inside of the airplane. Is this for real? I was just blown away at a very young age. And I knew then it was like, that is what I want to do for my life.
So I'm going to throw a question at you because I've had the situation of going from the cockpit to a remote control aircraft, and that bit about, like trying to make it turn left when it's coming towards me and I've got to move it right. And all. How did you go with going from like watching the aircraft and flying it to actually being in the cockpit and flying it?
It was interesting because, I grew up flying a lot of aerobatics with model airplanes. And then I went to the school at University of North Dakota in Grand Forks, North Dakota through their aviation program. And they also had a aerobatic course there. At the time, they were flying Cap 10Bs. And I went to my first lesson, and we had talked about all the contents of the course. Like, this is going to be, loops and rolls and hammerheads and cubins, and we're going to have all these things. And I said, okay, well, I want to just kind of fly through what I know from flying radio-controlled airplanes. And so he let me go, and I flew the entire course on my first go, pretty much in a sequence based on my experience flying model airplanes. So the translation was really good. The only thing that really kind of got a little messed up was the hammerhead. As you kick the left rudder, in a model, you don't need to use so much outside aileron like you will in a full-size airplane. So we kind of torqued off in the hammerhead, and we fixed that, on the next one. But the translation between models and airplanes, the full-size, and even vice versa, except for when it's coming at you, like you said, it's backwards. It's a very good translation between the two.
And it didn't cause you, like, the actual G-forces of being in the aircraft and having your stomach go everywhere and the world spin around you didn't cause too much distraction?
For me, it wasn't. But my flight instructor, by the time we were done with that, like 6 or 7 figures that we flew, he's like, okay, that's good enough for me. Because it was our first in North Dakota. You can imagine it's very, very cold there in the wintertime when we were flying. And so by the time we got to flying the aerobatic course, he had been off for a long time flying aerobatics. And so he lasted only about 5 minutes, and then we had to go back. And the next lesson he did, maybe 10 minutes. And by the third one, he was all back up to speed again. But it took him a minute to get dialed in again.
He'd built up his vitamin G once again.
Absolutely.
Jeff, can you describe the Yak 110, a very unique aircraft, or is it 2 aircraft? That'd be something just to solve for me. But and then perhaps tell us what inspired you to create this really unique aircraft.
The Yak 110. It's actually the first time in the history of aviation that 2 airplanes have been brought together and then added a jet engine. So it's that unique. And I had no vision of really having a Yak 55 even back in the day, but I was on the aerobatic team. I just qualified for my first advanced team in 2003 and was going to use the Russian Yak 55 at the World Championships in Sweden. So I was looking for a Yak to use, and that's how I found Chad Barty in the blue Yak. The blue side of the 110 was owned by Chad, and I called him. I said, hey, I'd like to use your airplane to get ready for the contest. But he was out in Texas. It was hard to get to. And, even though I flew his airplane a few times, it was not working out. I wasn't practicing enough. I wanted to have more. So I found the red airplane for sale, and I bought it. And I kept the airplane all through my aviation career, aerobatic career, when I was moving to an extra and some other airplanes along the way. I kept it because I knew there was going to be a good repurpose of this airplane. It's so cool. The radial engine, it sounds great. It's a big airplane. It looks good. And So I ended up keeping the airplane, even though I wasn't flying it much. But I did see it at a contest with one of my partners flying the airplane, and it was sitting on the ground by another Yak 55 in a way that, from a distance, it looked like one airplane. And I said, okay, I've got an idea now. That was about 2009. I'm like, all right, now it's just a matter of how do we make that happen, right? So I met Del Collar in 2013 when John Klatt hired him to build the Jet Waco, which you've probably seen that too.
Oh, yeah.
I flew that for the first 3 years, but that's an airplane that Del built also in addition to the Yak 110. And we during that time when we were both working for John, we kept discussing this idea of the Yak 110. And so we had a lot of years to go over all the details. And we pretty much had it all built in our heads, including artist renderings of what it would look like and things like this. So well, a lot of people say, well, that must have been a crazy night at the bar. And we say actually it was years of beers. So
some great hangar flying sessions, I'll bet.
Oh yeah. We had done a lot of thought process. And then when it came time to, it's like, man, this idea's out. We need to make it happen. And I said, let me call Chad and just see, and I said, okay, Chad, here's what I want to do. I called him up this September of 2016. I said, I want to take your old airplane and my Yak 55. I want to combine it together to make one and then put a jet engine on it. And he's like, you're out of your mind. I said, well, maybe, but it's going to work. We've been talking about this for a long time. It's going to work. And he's like, well, let me think on it. And he went to a happy hour with his buds, and he came back on the phone later that night. He called me at like 8:00 at night. And he said, man, I am totally in. Let's do this. And so from that point, it was literally not even a month later that we had bought my partners out of my airplane. We found Chad's airplane out on the East Coast. John wasn't selling the airplane, but we told him what we're doing, and he said, okay, yeah, that's a good enough cause. Let's do this. And so we took both airplanes to Boise, Idaho at Dell's place. And that was, like I said, 30 days after that phone call with Chad. And then it was 13 months after that we flew the airplane for the first time. So it went pretty quick. Once we finally got some finances behind the program and an engineer to help with the design of that center section, we were full speed ahead.
Now, it's got a really, really, really long tail on that turbine engine. So you can see that it looks like a turbofan at the front, and then you've got that really long jet pipe. Is that just to keep heat away from the horizontal stabilizer between the two fuselages, or does that actually give you any other benefits?
There's a multifunction there, but yes, what you have to do is you got to get all the hot air out past the horizontal, because otherwise it'd be right in line. And the other thing is, if you look closely, and you can see it in the Jet Waco more, where you have the bend in the pipe. If you look closely, even at the Yak 110, there is a slight bend in the pipe. And what that is when you have an action and the opposite reaction, so the reaction of the thrust goes right through the center of gravity of the Yak 110. So that allows me, when I push the jet power full, it doesn't pitch up. And when I pull it back, it doesn't pitch down. There's no pitch change because the thrust reaction goes right through the center of gravity. So that's probably more of a reason. I mean, you could put heat shields and stuff like that on there, but to get the thing so it doesn't pitch during a power change is the important part of that.
And did you figure that out on the ground, or was that figured out during some flight testing?
That was smart people that figured that out.
Yay, engineers.
Yeah, that was Eddie Sauerman. He's the guy that was in charge of all that. And we got it really close the first time. We ended up building a second jet mount just to be able to take out some weight that I had put in the tail. So we moved the jet in just a little bit after we flew it for a while. So, but yeah, they nailed it, really. I mean, the jet pipe, all that stuff was just right on it. In fact, after the Len Fox was done with his first test flight, he came to me and he said, "Man, you really have something here." And he said, "There's nothing we need to do." He did 2 flights. I did the third. He did the 4th flight and signed off the entire flight test program.
Wow.
And the only thing we did to the airplane was adjust the bendable aileron trim tab.
Oh, wow.
That was the only thing we changed on the airplane, just to level
That's
out.
impressive.
Yeah, it was.
I just kind of wonder, Jeff, from a pilot perspective, if something did go wrong, I mean, how's its asymmetric performance? If you lost one of those yak engines, or if you got so much thrust there, it doesn't kind of sort of matter too much.
It doesn't really matter, to be honest. The airplane, those engines are so close together compared to, I mean, imagine a twin Cessna, okay? You have the engines are farther apart and the props are small with less power, and you look straight behind the engine, there's no rudder. So in the Yak 110, you have all that 8-foot diameter prop wash going right over the horizontal, right over the vertical fin and the elevator rudder. You have a lot of control with the airplane. In fact, in the notes from the test pilot, under blue line speed and under critical engine, it says NA.
Wow.
You can run the critical engine. The blue side is technically critical because of the way the props turn. You can put that engine not at feather, but at full windmilling propeller, full power on the left side, and still fly the airplane well below the stall speed. So it's very, very, very cool. In fact, one of our first shows, Dell was at the show, and I flew the entire show. And when I landed, he said, "Hey, the smoke system on the right engine is not working." And I said, "Well, in fact, the smoke system's working. The engine was not running for pretty much that entire flight because we had a blocked fuel vent." So I flew the entire show. Even Dell didn't know that I didn't have an engine running for that 10-minute performance.
Do you take off and land on the jet?
The jet's running when I take off, and depends. Like here at Southport, they're very noise sensitive. So yesterday was my first flight out of here, and the jet is running, but it was just at idle. So when I take off, I'm not making a lot of noise. I'm trying to be very noise sensitive, but it's a lot more fun when you take off with the jet because it does definitely make a lot of noise. It's a Lear 24 jet engine that's quite noisy.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And there's 2 cockpits, of course. Do you have a preference from which you fly from, or can you operate it from either one, or can you take passengers?
We took all the controls out of the blue side, so I fly it from the red side. When we first flew the airplane, if you look at early photos of the airplane, you'll notice that the horizontal stabilizers are full length, all the way out on the outsides. And we left it like that. We left all the controls in place for the right side. In case it didn't work, we wanted to be able to take the center section out, put the wings back on, and sell the airplanes. And because we didn't modify the airplane such that it couldn't just be turned back into a single airplane. After the test flying and we knew that it was going to work, then we cut the horizontal stabilizers. And so now it can no longer be turned back into 2 separate airplanes. But
what's it like to actually do aerobatics, and especially aileron rolls and all that, from the left side or the right side, but not in line with the center line like you are in most aerobatic aircraft?
Yeah. So we, like I said, we eventually took the controls out of the right side in case there was a passenger over there. And 3 people have been in the airplane with me: Ben, Chad, and Dell, and all involved with the build. And one of the most impressive things when you put someone over in that cockpit, just like when I'm in this side, like you say, when you're doing an aileron roll, you're going around in a circle like a washing machine. You're not in the center. Like all my aerobatic experience, you're sitting right in the center of the fuselage, making small, physically making a small radius. Whereas in the Yak 110, you throw the ailerons over. And when I first started doing aerobatics, I would roll to the left, and the strangest feeling, because you come out of the seat, and so you're doing an aileron roll, yet you're experiencing negative G's because you imagine you're sitting on the left side, you put left aileron, and you come out of the seat. So you'll notice when I fly the airplane, I do most of the rolls to the right, because for whatever reason, having a little positive G in the airplane versus a negative G, it just makes more sense in your head. So, but yeah, there's a lot of that. Took some time to get to reprogram. We call it seat of the pants, where your feet are down there just doing rudder stuff. You don't really think about it. Like when I fly the 330 SC in competition, for example, and that airplane's rolling at over 500 degrees per second, you don't really have time to think about what your feet are doing on the pedals. You've programmed it so much that they're just doing what needs to be done. And then you take that and translate that into the yak, and the seat of the pants was just crazy. I ended up having to get to a point where I was basically putting my feet flat on the floor and trying to do rolls and getting the seat of the pants reprogrammed for the Yak 110. That's really different. That was probably the most complicated part about learning to fly the Yak.
And shifting back and forth, it just happens like for me, going from left side drive to right side drive as I travel around the place.
Right.
You just change.
You do. And it's, that's like, well, what rudder do you use? Well, you use whatever is required, right? If you're going down a runway and it's going to the left, you put right rudder. So, the instinct part of it is still the same, but the seat of the pants flying was quite a bit different.
How did you go with the approval process once you'd constructed the airplane, you're out there testing it? How did, I guess, the FAA, in your case, how did they view the aircraft? Was it a very involved process, a long process?
It took about as long to do the FAA process as it did to build the airplane.
Right.
So very extensive. Part of that, to be fair, was the airplane was being built in Boise, Idaho. So we had to go through that local office to then get assigned to a MIDO office in Seattle. Well, we wanted to use a DAR that was in Wyoming, and that person was assigned to a Phoenix office. So then we had to have it transferred down to the Phoenix office. And then we finally got our DAR assigned. That took about 6 months. Once the DAR got there, the airplane had been put together and the controls were hooked up. And he came and looked at the airplane, and he sat there for like 10 minutes looking it over and moving the controls. And then he came and looked at us and scratching his head, and he says, "Where is the complicated stuff?" It's like, it's so simple. We just tied the elevators all together. The aileron push tubes, all we did was an idler in the center section and one more tube, and right to the controls of the right side aileron system. Nothing there. And we just ran push-pull cables from this set of rudder pedals to that set of rudder pedals that controlled the rudder. It's like nothing was complicated. And so he was really impressed. And of course, the Yak 55 to begin with is a well-engineered airplane. It's built by the Yakolev Design Bureau. So you're not going from a garage-built kind of airplane. You're going from a military-built airplane, combined it together with a very well-engineered center section, which we had all the data from, the stress analysis and all this stuff that went into that center section. And he was quite impressed. And when he made his second visit to the airport, it was to give us an airworthiness certificate. And at that point, once we had checked all the boxes and everything was set to go, he had no issues giving us an airworthiness certificate.
You're flying here at Surfers Paradise. You've already mentioned launching out of Southport, the noise sensitive. There's a lot of horses in the area. Everyone's got their noise sensitivity briefings and watch out for these. But what challenges do you have at Surfers, given the proximity of the Gold Coast International Airport, the beach, the crowds? It's not like a normal at an airport kind of display. How does it go?
What's cool is, Kevin Elliott is a rock star when it comes to what he's doing with Pacific Airshow. And Huntington Beach is a surfer's paradise also. And so, we're going from flying with the sun out to the west to here flying with the sun to the west, but you're looking at the ocean. We've just crossed the Pacific, but it's almost exactly the same, except for here. It's so cool when you get to fly next to the skyscrapers, because we don't really have that at Huntington Beach. But I've done that at a few shows where you're flying aerobatics and there's a large building right there. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, the you can do a VFR corridor kind of flight along the beach, and you're looking up at the buildings and things like that. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I've passed down there a couple times just to go make some noise along the beach. It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's going to be a great venue. I'm super excited to see just a ton of people on that beach watching air show. It's going to be an awesome week.
Fantastic.
Well, Jeff, thanks so much for joining us. We've really enjoyed speaking to you, and we're really looking forward to watching you fly at the Pacific Airshow on the Gold Coast. And, of course, if people want to find out more about you and your airplane, they can look that up at yak110.com.
Yes, sir. Yeah, check us out.
Fantastic. Jeff Boerboon, thanks so much for joining us.
All right, awesome, guys.
And as we let Jeff head off there to, I guess, prepare for the great weekend of action, Grant, what a unique aircraft. Just looking at some of the videos of it, it's just such a cool thing. I mean, imagine trying to put that sort of stuff together here. That might have been quite a process, I imagine, with the authorities and...
Yeah, and you want to do what and so on. But hey, look, I saw it at Oshkosh 2019, and it was amazing to see and hear then. And I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing it with the backdrop of the bustle of Surfers Paradise and the beach and the waves and everything all around us as we're standing there.
And, of course, folks, you want to find out more information about that and perhaps buy some tickets, you can find that at Pacific Airshow Oz, as in AUS.com. Really encourage you to do that. And, of course, as I mentioned at the start of the show, Grant and I will be there. So keep an eye out for us and keep an ear out for us. You never know where you might see or hear us, Grant, while we're there.
I know, right? And, of course, don't forget to use contact@planecrazydownunder.com to let us know if you're going to be there, or connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc.
And, of course, you know what happens, Grant, when people do that sort of stuff. This guy comes down the street.
He's a ledge.
It's always nice when he brings us listener mail and not, bills and, council rates and stuff like that.
I know.
Oh, Grant, look, I've even printed this one out, see? That's not even a simulated sound effect.
It's real paper. You've actually gone and printed it out. I am shocked.
Real honest to goodness
paperless
paper.
Office, man.
No. I'm a very old-fashioned person. I don't even like glass cockpits, Grant. You know that.
Yeah, well, I can't really talk because I do have a tablet when I fly a balloon, and I'm not talking about the calm my nerves tablet either.
I was going to say, what type of tablet? Yes.
Yeah, no. It's the it's.
I'd have to take a lot of tablets to go up in a balloon, as many of our listeners would know, Grant.
You would be on the floor of the basket, completely knocked out, if you even got up that early in the morning.
Yeah, that might be a strategy for you. Anyway, we'll discuss that at the next meeting. Anyhow, Grant, we've got an email here from our old mate, Mick from the Frankston line, although, as I note here, he's no longer of the Frankston line, Grant.
No, it's Mick, formerly of the Frankston line, or the Franger line, as we like to say. But Mick, he moved out of Melbourne, went out near Sale and to the east and coastal and all that, out near the RAF base at East Sale. And then he is now out in the boonies of South Australia with some wonderful views that he keeps sending us photos of. Just to, I'm sorry, is that your knife? It's quite lovely scenery out there.
Now, of course, we call it Mick from the Frankston line because Mick used to catch trains on the Frankston line. And for those of you who don't know, well, I actually do have a bit of a day job. I'm not always in this studio, Grant. Sometimes I have to go out and make an honest living, and I do that by driving trains. So I've probably driven Mick several million times up and down that line back in the day.
Yes, but only when you get unchained from the recording desk and you don't have volume 7 of the Honey-Do list from Kathy.
That's exactly right. Anyway, Mick just wrote in to say that he really enjoyed the interview with Terry Daniel, or as he calls it, old mate traffic report. And that's good. That was a great episode with Terry. It was great to catch up with him, and that was a really enjoyable chat. So glad to hear from you, Mick, and thanks for taking the time to write in for us. And, you'll have to come back here to Melbourne and have another ride on the train, I suppose.
Well, there's always that. He also suggested that, he reckons I should do a static line jump, not a tandem. We'll see about that. And also suggested that we should go down to RSLs and have lunch and look for the folks who used to fly and maybe get some stories that way. I think that's probably an idea, and, could also contribute to me having a few beers and a chicken parma.
Well, certainly living at large there, mate.
Or depending on where you're around the world, it's some people in Australia call it chicken parma, some call it chicken palmy, others call it a chicken parmigiana.
Just goes to show how cultured you are, I suppose.
Yeah, well, anything for a bunch of
Plus, everybody's
chips.
perception of culture probably depends on where they live in the first place.
Yeah,
so it's kind of a circular argument.
Normally, the closest I get to culture is when I open a tub of yogurt.
Oh, God. Insert laugh track here.
And rim shot.
Anyway, folks, you too can drop us a line, and we'd certainly love to hear from you. Contact at planecrazydownunder.com. Well, Grant, I suppose we ought to pack our bags and get ready for that Virgin Australia flight up there to the Gold Coast. Really looking forward to getting up there for the Pacific Airshow. Folks, we certainly hope to see you up there as well, and send us some photos and certainly let us know your impressions. Grant, we are intending to catch up with Kevin again in the weeks after the show, and hopefully he'll be able to give us some time just to let us know, how we thought it all went.
Yeah, he said we can catch up with him during the show, but no recording at the time. He'll be a little busy. And
he'll be a little stressed, I imagine, yes.
Well, there's also the VIP gig on the Saturday night, but, I think we'll be leaving our recorders at home for that one.
Folks, thanks very much for joining us on the program. We certainly hope you enjoyed it. Steve Fisher and Grant McHerron wishing you very safe flying, folks, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Find show notes for this episode along with our contact details and a full back catalogue of shows at planecrazydownunder.com. Drop us a line anytime with feedback, story suggestions or advertising inquiries. We'd love to hear from you. Plane Crazy Down Under is a Southern Skies media production.
Southern Skies Media.